What is up, YouTube? As of recording this video on March 27th, I am currently the rank 1 player for the US East region as a whole. I thought it would be a good idea to give my opinion on a PvP tier list. An important note is this video is a tier list for solo queue ranked. It is not for the 1v1 game mode, and it is not for coordinated play, otherwise known as tournament play. This is the opinion of someone who one-tricks Gunslinger, but I will try to be as unbiased as I possibly can. I'll try to keep this video as short as possible with brief explanations and pros and cons of each class. Let's jump right into it and start with the first class on the list, which is Deathblade. Deathblade is a bruiser fighter. She has decent damage, she's really good at farming newer players, she has good matchups into fighters, and a lot of super armor. Some of her downsides are no ranged hard CC. She's relatively squishy, and she has predictable engages because she's kind of flowcharty. Despite all of her, despite her pros and cons, I would rate Deathblade in the S tier for solo queue ranked. The next class, Shadowhunter, otherwise known as Demonic. Shadowhunter is a ranged / melee assassin. She has extremely good ranged poke and ranged peel for your team. She can be a nuisance from range, and she can be a nuisance from melee. She excels at doing heavy burst damage and sitting in the back lines and just kind of baiting teammates in a way and just doing damage off of that / protecting them. Some of her downsides is she does have to play around her cooldowns a lot. She requires a lot of knowledge of when and when not to go in, and you have to utilize her range / melee playstyle. With that being said, I would rate Demonic in the A tier. I might move her up to A+ once we see the end of this tier list, but for now, I'm going to keep her there. The next class, Artillerist. Artillerist is a extremely high damage beefy boy. He does insane burst. He can catch you off guard. He's really good versus newer players. Probably, if not the best versus new players out of any other class on this list. And he just overall has a ridiculous amount of damage. Some of his downsides are he does get a lot worse when you go versus good players that can exploit his weaknesses, like his lack of mobility, and the fact that he's a class that kind of evolves around two of his abilities, and when those abilities are down, which is his shield and his stun, he's really easy to deal with. So if you play around those correctly, he gets a lot easier to deal with. Just given the fact that he's quite the noob stomper and extremely good for climbing, especially pushing past the lower ranks, because not a lot of players know how to play around him, I'm going to rate him in the A+ tier. The next class, Deadeye, which is the male counterpart to Gunslinger. Unfortunately, Deadeye is in a little bit of a weird spot because no one really plays him because Gunslinger is outright better in PvP, in 3v3 TDM. That's mainly because Deadeye, the pro Deadeye has over Gunslinger is that he has the option of a kick in his pistol skill set, so he has an extra push / push immune, and he's just better into melee matchups. But the biggest downside is his sniper is strictly worse and less safe than Gunslinger, which makes Gunslinger a lot more versatile, and she can get off her damage easier. Because of this, Deadeye is just not as good as Gunslinger, and I would probably put him in A or B+. I'm going to leave him in B+ for now, and we'll move on to the next class, which is Gunslinger, the female counterpart to Deadeye. Gunslinger excels in high mobility, quick burst damage from ranged and melee with her shotgun and sniper, and she can be safe, and she can be extremely hard to catch. The downside of this class is she is one of, if not the hardest class to play in the entire game. She is the squishiest class in the game. In our current roster of characters, she is the squishiest class in the game. And yeah, she's just difficult to play. Despite that, I would put her personally in A+ tier. I was originally going to put her in S tier, but granted the ease of use for some of these other classes that I have in mind for S tier, I'm going to leave her at the probably highest of A plus tier. We're going to try and order this tier list from left to right as best we can. The next class that we have is Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is a ranged, a ranged archer guy. He's not very well played. He's not very well represented, and he's just like, he's average because all of his damage evolves around his snipe shot. In coordinated play, which is not what this tier list is made for, he is a little bit better. But for solo queue purposes only, he is extremely hard to play around your team, because not only do they have to play around your claymore and just the way your class functions around like pretty much two cooldowns, which is the claymore and the snipe shot, he just lacks consistent damage and he lacks options on the battlefield. And because of that, I'm going to put him in the lowest tier possible, which is B on our list. The next class, which is Sorceress, one of the most popular classes in the game, is an extremely strong mage. I would argue to say Sorceress is a better version of Artillerist. She has off-screen poke, which can catch you off guard into a high damage nuke combo, and she can self-peel herself, and she is extremely hard to catch with her identity skill. It effectively gives her 3 spaces, which is very strong. One of her downsides is she does get a lot harder to play when you're versus really good players, and she is also, you have to predict a lot of movement and you have to have game knowledge to be able to effectively deal with certain classes chasing after you. Despite her pros and cons, I'm going to put her in S tier. We're going to order the tier list from left to right a little bit later, but for now we're just going to put things where I briefly think they're going to go. The next class we have is Bard. Bard is one of the 3 support classes in the game, the first one we're going to cover. She is a extremely good support because she offers DR, and then she also, DR is damage reduction, and she also has a extremely good ultimate which gives a huge shield. Her best pro is the fact that she's a support. Supports are extremely good in solo queue PvP because matchmaking is not balanced to put a support on each team. So if one team has a support and the other team doesn't have a support, the team with a support has a higher chance of winning, in my opinion. She excels at protecting her teammates. She has a slight bit of damage with her beam laser. I don't know what it's called. She'll like stun you into beam laser, and that's most of her damage. But yeah, she's mainly just for protecting teammates and keeping them alive. Just because she's a support naturally, she is not going any lower than A+. I probably won't put her in S because that's reserved for a different support, but I will keep her in A+ for now. Scrapper, the next character on the list, which is a part of the martial artists. She's a bruiser class that relies on burst damage and quick engages and quickly getting out. She has a lack of super armor. She has a couple of super armors, but not many. And she's very hard to play because you need to know you need to know when you can punish and when you can't punish. She is extremely hard to play in certain classes like Blade. And because of that, and just because of the current meta classes, I'm going to put Scrapper at B. Probably, if there was a middle tier, I would put her like somewhere in here, but I'll probably put her at the end of A. The next class, which is Sophist, another class in the martial artist category. She is, she's basically like a ranged melee type, kind of very, very similar to Demonic, I'd say. Whereas she can poke you from range, she can play very good peel, and she can also get up in front of your face, CC you, and preoccupy you. She's squishy and she's hard to play and she requires game knowledge, again, very similar to Shadowhunter. But In my opinion, she is strictly worse than Shadowhunter. So although I'm going to put them in the same tier, I'll put her below Shadowhunter since we're tiering it from left to right. The next class is Striker. Striker is one of the most annoying classes in my opinion. He is the most aggressive martial artist. He tries to get in your face, he tries to keep you CC'd, and just constantly get your rolls on your team. He excels at bouncing between targets, knocking people down, and doing a lot of damage very fast and just being a nuisance. He's extremely mobile and high burst. His downsides are extreme lack of super armor. He only has one push immune, which is on his red dragon kick. And he has a very bad matchup in the Blade, and he's just hard to play because it requires that game knowledge. All the martial artists basically lack super armor for the most part. Striker being the worst one, I believe. Or actually, I think War Dancer has 0 super armor. But yeah, one of the worst ones. But despite that, I think Striker is an extremely, extremely good class for solo queue. Despite him being hard to play, I would put him at A+. The next class, War Dancer, which is the female counterpart to Striker. She is very similar to Striker, but she is less aggressive and more defensive. The reason that she's more defensive is because she gives a DR, a damage reduction shield, to her whole team. And she lacks the amount of abilities that Striker has to go in and beat you up. But on the other hand, she gives you that damage reduction ability, and she, more often than not, will take the tornado ability, which also gives you that presence on the battlefield to keep the target CC'd and help your team out. Not all War Dancers spec into Tornado, some will go the stun kick, but regardless, she's very good at being a nuisance on the field, and the DR buff is extremely, extremely good. In my opinion, War Dancer is at the top of A+ tier. I think she is borderline S tier, but I wouldn't quite put her in S tier, just granted that there are a few classes that stand out above the rest, and I don't think she is one of them. But I think she is very close. The next class in our beefy boy list is Berserker. Berserker is a high damage and slow class. He likes to chain his super armors together to just be a presence on the field, get in your face, do a shit ton of damage, and get out. He is one of the classes with probably some of the highest damage in the game with his combos. And he has access to 2 tier 3 CCs, which is, I think, his main strength. With it being the step kick and then the earthquake shatter. Some of his cons are he's very slow, he's very predictable at times, and once you understand what he wants to do, it's not that hard to see it. But again, it is a very hard class to deal with. In my opinion, I would put Berserker probably at high A tier. In my opinion, I wouldn't put him above Shadowhunter, but I haven't seen many Zerkers, so I could be wrong about this one. Again, this tier list is my opinion and just my experience on the ladder as a whole so far. The next class, which is the second support, is Gunlancer. Gunlancer being a support, naturally, he's going to be in a high tier. He is essentially a brick wall on the battlefield. He is someone that is extremely hard to get past. He will constantly CC you, constantly peel his teammates. He'll just be an annoying presence on the map while also being extremely, extremely hard to kill. He also offers that damage reduction to his team, which is also always annoying. Damage reduction on any character is very, very annoying to deal with. He gives a shield to his team as well. His con is he's extremely slow. He does have a flowcharty playstyle at times. And yeah, I think that's about it. I can't think of many cons for him, to be honest. He's just very slow and very predictable at times. He also has access to counter, which is one of the best skills in the game because it allows you to immune tier 3 CCs. Because of this, and because of him being a support, naturally he's going to go into A+ tier or higher. I'm going to put him probably above Artillerist. And we're going to adjust Bard, and we're going to put Bard above Artillerist too. In my opinion, Bard is probably better than Gunlancer, but just for the overall sake of all elos taken into account, I'll say that on average I would rather have a Gunlancer over a Bard. Because Bard, in my opinion, is a little bit harder to play. Alright, and the next support, which is Paladin. Paladin is a extremely good class. He has good damage while also offering many forms of damage reduction and also having access to the best, if not one of the best ults in the entire game, in my opinion. He is extremely problematic, not only offensively, but defensively he is extremely problematic too, providing DR to his team while also providing massive shields and just making you play around him. He's a presence on offense, getting your rolls and knocking you down and just disrupting your team as a whole. Paladin for me is an easy best character in the game. In my opinion, there is no other character I would put this high, and honestly I would maybe put him a tier above everyone else, but just for the sake of to make the tier list look nice, I'll put him at the top of S tier. And that is it. That is the whole tier list. I hope I covered everything semi-well. I did this video in one take, so it might have been a little bit scuffed with my words, but I do apologize for that. If you guys have any further additional questions, you feel free to comment down in the YouTube video comments. I try to answer those as best as I can. And if I'm not answering it there, you can always come to my Twitch at twitch.tv/Averse and ask me there personally, and I always answer chat. But yeah, thank you for watching the video, guys. I hoped it proved to be helpful, and I hope you have a good day.